Excuse me, sir. I need to ask you a few questions regarding the Sterling case.
I am due in court right now, officer. I cannot be late.
This is your last chance to cooperate.
We are fully aware of our rights. We'll proceed as planned.
He had stayed late at the office, reviewing evidence for a federal case, unaware that the most dangerous threat tonight would not come from a courtroom opponent, but from the uniformed man waiting near the entrance. "Hey, you!" The officer barked, stepping into Marcus's path. His voice was sharp, accusatory, carrying a familiarity reserved for suspicion, not civility. Marcus paused, instinctively checking his coat, his ID, the small federal badge clipped beneath his tie. "You looking for trouble?" The officer sneered, eyes narrowing as if Marcus's very presence was a crime. Marcus's heart thumped, a taut rhythm against the pounding rain. "Sir, I'm—" "Yeah, right. Move along, criminal." The words cut through him like ice. Around him, the courthouse steps emptied, strangers' faces blurred and a streetlight flickered above, casting half-shadows that twisted the officer's grin into menace. Marcus swallowed the rising rage, forced a calm he didn't feel, his mind racing for legal leverage, for justification that would matter to anyone. He reached for his ID, the wet edge of the badge slick under his fingers, just as the officer stepped closer, hand twitching toward his belt. Marcus realized, in that heartbeat, that he was utterly exposed, not by law, but by the man's assumptions. The officer leaned in, voice low and venomous. "You're not getting away this time." Marcus froze, knowing the night had just begun. Rain slicked the courthouse steps, pooling in rivulets that reflected neon signage from nearby law offices. Marcus Ellison adjusted the strap of his briefcase, leather creaking under the weight of files documenting federal investigations. His shoes clicked against wet stone, a sharp, measured rhythm that punctuated the night's uneasy quiet. "Hey, you!" The bark of authority cut through the downpour. Marcus froze mid-step. A white uniformed officer, badge gleaming faintly in the streetlight, stepped onto his path, fist taut at his sides. The officer's eyes narrowed, scanning Marcus with a scrutiny reserved for suspicion, not civility. "I said, you," the officer snapped. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Sir, I'm—" "You think you can just walk through here?" the officer sneered, leaning in. "You don't belong. Move along, criminal." The words felt like steel slicing through the rain. Marcus's chest tightened. His mind flared, flashing through possibilities, legal arguments, his federal credentials clipped inside his tie. He pulled the badge out, letting it glint under the yellowed streetlight. "I'm the Attorney General. Do you see this?" The officer's lip curled, dismissive. "Yeah, sure. Everyone has a fancy title these days. Doesn't change what I see." "Sir, you're making a mistake. I see a threat. That's enough." Marcus's hands gripped his briefcase tighter. Around him, the courthouse steps emptied, strangers' faces blurred in rain-streaked light. A passerby muttered under their breath, stepping back. Another lifted a phone, recording. Marcus realized, in that heartbeat, that power here was not his. It was perception. The officer moved closer, hand twitching toward his belt. Marcus's pulse jumped. He forced his calm, words clipped, surgical. "You are acting outside your authority. I am a federal official." The officer interrupted with a low, venomous chuckle. "You're not getting away this time." Marcus's stomach sank. The threat wasn't about law. It was about assumption. He could feel the tension radiating from every shadowed corner of the empty steps, every witness frozen in mid-motion. Raindrops slid into his eyes as he swallowed his rage. A flash of headlights illuminated the officer's face, twisted with contempt. The officer's grip on power was palpable, almost tangible, like the wet stone beneath Marcus's feet. Marcus's mind raced, seeking leverage in a world that had already judged him guilty. One misstep could escalate this confrontation into ruin. The rain intensified, hammering the steps, drumming on the briefcase that now felt heavier than a tombstone. The officer's voice cut through the storm. "Step aside, or I'll do it for you." Marcus froze, chest tight, mind sharp. He had power on paper, credentials in hand, but the night, the storm, the assumptions, they weighed more than any title. The officer's shadow stretched long across the wet steps. Marcus knew the confrontation was far from over. Marcus pushed through the courthouse doors, rainwater dripping from his coat onto the polished marble floor. The lobby smelled of disinfectant and old leather. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. He spotted the officer lingering near the security desk, arms crossed, smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Back again," the officer called, loud enough for the sparse crowd to hear. Marcus's heart tightened, but his posture remained composed. "I am here on official business," Marcus said, voice even, clipped. "I am the Attorney General." The officer waved a hand dismissively. Yeah, you say that now. Doesn't change what I see." Marcus exhaled slowly, mind racing. He moved toward the elevator bank, determined to reach the officers above, but the officer intercepted, stepping into his path. "You really think flashing a badge will make me respect you?" the officer jeered. "I expect you to respect the law," Marcus said firmly, adjusting the badge beneath his tie for emphasis. Nearby, a uniformed colleague of the officer glanced at the scene, hesitated, then returned to her paperwork. A courthouse clerk muttered under her breath, eyes downcast. Silence and avoidance were as present as the officer's arrogance. "Sir," Marcus tried again, "you are making a legal mistake. I have the authority to." "Authority? That doesn't matter to me. You're just another threat in my eyes," the officer cut in, leaning close enough for Marcus to feel a faint smell of tobacco and sweat. A visitor stepped forward, muttering, "Maybe you should just let him through." The officer waved her off. His confidence was bolstered by institutional inertia, by the unspoken approval of those around him who chose silence over confrontation. Marcus clenched his fists around his briefcase. Internally, he catalogued options: security cameras, internal affairs complaints, public witnesses. Every procedural leverage felt dwarfed by the officer's refusal to see him as anything but a suspect. "I am the Attorney General," Marcus said again, voice firmer. "You are violating my rights." The officer laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Rights? You think a title gives you immunity from suspicion? Keep dreaming." Tension thickened, echoing off the high ceilings. Passers-by slowed, sensing the confrontation. Marcus's pulse drummed against his ribs. Each syllable from the officer was an assertion of arbitrary power. Each breath he took felt like a refusal of validation, a test of endurance. A security guard finally stepped closer, neutral but wary. "Sir, maybe we can resolve this," he began. The officer waved him off, still smirking, still in control. Marcus felt the institutional weight pressing down on him, the social hierarchy coded in gestures, tone, and silent compliance. Marcus's jaw tightened. He forced himself to speak clearly, measured, relentless. "I am a federal official. You are accountable for unlawful obstruction. I demand compliance with the law." "You demand," the officer said, voice low and menacing. "Hey, you're just another black man trying to talk his way out of suspicion. Titles don't change that." Marcus's chest burned with rage, humiliation, and disbelief. Around him, the courthouse was a theater of inaction. His identity, credentials, and authority were invisible to the officer's prejudice. One bystander, phone discreetly recording, whispered, "This isn't right." Another simply turned and walked away. Marcus realized how isolating powerlessness could feel in the midst of official structures that should have protected him. The officer's grip on perceived control remained absolute, grounded in bias rather than law. Marcus's mind catalogued every violation, every witness, every procedural safeguard that could be leveraged later. Each one felt like a weapon against a man who wielded authority without accountability. Finally, Marcus took a slow step back, calculating his next move. The officer mirrored him, smirk unwavering, dominance asserted through posture and tone. "You think you can lecture me?" the officer taunted. Marcus's hand brushed the badge inside his tie. Every fiber of his being demanded confrontation, but he knew a direct escalation would play into the officer's assumptions. Patience, strategy, documentation, these were his weapons. The officer leaned in, whispering just enough for Marcus to hear. "Next time, you won't get away with it." Marcus met his gaze, unflinching. The room seemed to hold its breath. The officer turned abruptly and walked toward the exit, leaving Marcus standing under the fluorescent lights, soaked, humiliated, and burning with controlled fury. The next morning, Marcus sat in his sleek downtown office, the rain still clinging to the city streets outside. A muted television flickered in the corner, broadcasting an early news segment. His phone buzzed relentlessly, emails, text messages, social media notifications. Something had gone viral. He froze as the screen displayed footage from the previous night, the confrontation outside the courthouse. The officer's sneer, the dismissive wave of his hand, the words, "Move along, criminal," all captured in sharp detail. Marcus's polished image, briefcase in hand, was juxtaposed with the officer's raw aggression. Comments scrolled rapidly, outrage, disbelief, support, and the occasional defensive argument from strangers. Is this really happening? Marcus muttered under his breath. His assistant, Lena, hovered nearby, concern etched on her face. So, someone filmed the entire thing. It's all over social media, she said. Marcus leaned forward, eyes scanning every angle. The officer's body language was unmistakable, confidence rooted in bias. The crowd's whispers and stays, now frozen on screen, amplified the humiliation. This isn't just about me, Marcus said, voice tight. It's about the message it sends, that authority can be twisted by prejudice. Lena nodded, silently recording details as Marcus outlined potential responses. Meanwhile, reporters began calling, wanting statements. Marcus's office phone rang in sharp succession. The dialogue was rapid-fire. Questions, clarifications, cautious admiration from some, skepticism from others. "Can you confirm your credentials?" one reporter asked. "Yes," Marcus replied evenly. "I am the Attorney General." This confrontation was unwarranted and based solely on bias. "Do you plan to take action against the officer?" another pressed. "Appropriate legal measures are being pursued. This is about accountability, not retaliation," Marcus said. Internally, Marcus weighed every word, every phrase, knowing each would shape public perception. The viral footage stripped away anonymity and forced a broader conversation about systemic injustice. His phone buzzed again, notification from colleagues, federal contacts, and activists. Dialogue overlapped with news clips, highlighting the growing awareness of racial profiling. Each voice, each comment, amplified the tension between private authority and public perception. By noon, media crews began arriving outside the courthouse. Cameras pointed toward the steps where the confrontation had occurred. Dialogue from passers-by, whispers of outrage, and repeated accounts from witnesses created a chorus of scrutiny. Marcus observed, noting reactions, recording details, and preparing for formal statements. In one clip, the officer appeared on camera, attempting to justify his actions. His words were defensive, his tone condescending, but the raw evidence undermined him. Dialogue and visuals reinforced the stark imbalance of power and prejudice that had fueled the encounter. Marcus felt the emotional weight settle in his chest, humiliation, frustration, and a sense of moral urgency. The viral spread of the footage had shifted control. Perception now worked partially in his favor, turning public attention onto injustice rather than the victim. As the day ended, Marcus stood by the window, watching the courthouse steps empty in the fading light. The storm had passed, but the tension remained, unresolved. Dialogue from news anchors echoed in his mind. The Attorney General confronted a police officer's bias head-on last night, but the story is far from over. Marcus exhaled slowly. The officer's assumption had been exposed, but accountability was still pending. Every message, every clip, every whispered conversation built toward a confrontation that would demand resolution. The courthouse was quieter than usual when Marcus returned the next evening. Fluorescent lights hummed above, casting a sterile glow on the polished floors. The officer was already there, leaning against a column near the entrance, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Marcus as if measuring him for some unseen crime. "Back again," the officer said, voice low and taunting. The words carried no question, only a presumption of guilt. Marcus squared his shoulders. "I am here for official business. Your previous behavior was inappropriate and unlawful." The officer smirked. "Lawful? You really believe that matters? You might have a badge, a title, but I decide what looks suspicious." Marcus felt the tension coil in his chest. He knew that escalation was inevitable. The officer's bias was not passive. "You're threatening me," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. Every word you speak, every gesture you make, is being documented. Any misconduct will be addressed. The officer leaned closer, eyes glinting with condescension. Document all you want. Doesn't change what I see. Step out of line again, and I'll make sure you regret it. You think being the Attorney General protects you? Not here. A clerk passed by, silently recording the interaction on their phone. Another visitor glanced nervously, avoiding eye contact, the quiet acknowledgement of the power imbalance evident in their posture. Dialogue between bystanders, whispered and cautious, punctuated the officer's intimidation. He's just standing there. They can't do anything. Watch, they'll push him again. Marcus's mind raced. Legal recourse was clear, but the immediacy of the threat left no room for procedural patience. Every step he took was calculated, words measured, posture controlled. He had learned the officer thrived on reaction, on fear. You have no idea who I am, Marcus said, voice taut, gripping the briefcase. The officer laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. I see exactly who you are. Just another black man thinking authority can protect him. Not on my watch. Marcus's hand brushed a federal badge inside his tie. He didn't need it for himself. He needed it for the record, for leverage, for proof that the law was on his side while bias clouded the officer's judgment. Every action you take is on record, Marcus continued, tone cutting, deliberate. This confrontation, your threats, your refusal to comply, everything will have consequences. The officer tilted his head, incredulous. Consequences? You think a piece of paper and a badge can change reality? Hey, reality is mine to define. A sharp knock at the security office door drew the officer's attention momentarily. Marcus seized a moment, moving toward the lobby cameras, tracing angles, noting which witnesses were visible, which might corroborate the encounter. You're just prolonging the inevitable, the officer hissed, voice low, almost a growl. You will regret standing up to me. Marcus stopped, feeling the weight of the officer's gaze, the authority rooted in unchecked prejudice. He met it without flinching. Dialogue became his shield as much as narration. Every assertion, every measured phrase aimed to expose, to document, to survive. Security cameras captured the officer's movements, the tension in his stance, the slow, deliberate intimidation. Marcus cataloged gestures, notes, and dialogue in his mind. He recognized patterns, the way microaggressions escalated, the subtle manipulations, the reliance on bystander compliance. You'll see, the officer whispered as he stepped back, the corner of his mouth curling in a smirk. Next time, I won't just warn you. Marcus exhaled, muscles taut, and turned toward the staircase leading to the offices above. He knew escalation was coming, but so was resistance. He had begun documenting every interaction, noting witnesses, recording dialogue. Patience and strategy had become his weapons against unchecked prejudice. By the time he reached the top floor, Marcus's reflection in the elevator mirror was stoic, composed, yet underlined with a simmering fire. Every threat, every verbal jab, had been noted, every microaggression catalogued. The officer's belief in impunity was fragile, but dangerous. Marcus placed his briefcase on the desk, pulled out his notes, and began drafting a detailed report, every word of dialogue logged, every threat recorded, every bystander reaction noted. Legal authority was on his side, but emotional endurance was a battlefield. He felt the full weight of systemic bias pressing down, the casual dismissal, the microaggressions, the overt threats. And yet, as he worked, a spark of strategic clarity emerged. Exposure, documentation, patience. The officer's power was a function of secrecy, assumption, and fear. Remove those, and the truth became unavoidable. The rain continued to fall outside, drumming against the building's windows. Inside, Marcus prepared for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that every detail he captured could tip the scales toward justice. Marcus leaned over the conference table, eyes scanning the documents spread before him. Each page detailed the previous night's events, timestamps, witness statements, security footage notes, and transcriptions of the officer's words. He had spent hours cataloging every microaggression, every implicit threat. The officer's actions were no longer a fleeting moment of humiliation. There were evidence of systemic abuse. Lena sat across from him, fingers poised over a laptop. I've cross-referenced all social media uploads. The video has thousands of views already. People are outraged, but there are also defenders of the officer. Marcus rubbed his temple. It doesn't matter. The record exists. The law exists. We just have to ensure it's undeniable, irrefutable. He reached for his phone and began calling colleagues in the Justice Department. Dialogue was precise, almost surgical. Marcus, the footage, one voice asked. It's all here. I need internal affairs involved immediately. Prepare a formal complaint against the officer. Include witness statements and timestamps. And the media? I'll issue a statement once internal processes begin. We control the narrative without inflaming the situation. Each conversation was a tactical move. Marcus recognized that exposing bias required methodical precision, not reactive emotion. Later, he met with a trusted mentor in a quiet, glass-paneled office overlooking the city. The dialogue was direct, strategic. Marcus, public exposure is dangerous. The mentor warned. You risk politicizing this, giving the officer an argument of biased claims. That's why documentation is key, Marcus replied. Every step is verifiable. Every word on tape. If the officer claimed falsehoods, the evidence contradicts him. Even as he spoke, Marcus's mind cataloged procedural steps, filing formal complaints, securing witness cooperation, reviewing surveillance, and preparing legal briefs. The officer's arrogance was a liability. It made him predictable. Meanwhile, news outlets were contacting Marcus for official comments. Dialogue was succinct, measured, focused on principle rather than personal grievance. This is about accountability, Marcus stated. Bias has no place in law enforcement. Every citizen deserves equal protection under the law. Internally, Marcus wrestled with the emotional toll. Every interaction with the officer had chipped at his composure, and every public mention of the confrontation dredged up humiliation. Dialogue with his assistant revealed the weight of the ordeal. You're carrying this on multiple fronts, Lena observed. I have to, Marcus replied. If I let it slide, it reinforces the system's failure. The mentor's guidance echoed in his mind. Strategy, patience, meticulous evidence. Marcus worked late into the night, drafting letters, compiling timelines, cross-referencing security footage. Each page strengthened the case against the officer. Dialogue with witnesses was carefully structured. He spoke with courthouse clerks, bystanders who had recorded the encounter, and even the security team, extracting details without biasing recollection. Each exchange added clarity and legitimacy to the eventual legal confrontation. Marcus also began preparing emotionally. He recognized that systemic injustice carried a personal cost: humiliation, stress, and the erosion of trust in institutional fairness. His internal narration reflected this, noting the psychological strain while reinforcing purpose. Strategic resistance was both legal and moral. As the day progressed, Marcus reviewed the viral footage repeatedly, not for outrage but for insight. He noted the officer's patterns, posturing, gestures, phrasing, and the subtle ways he relied on bystander inaction. Each observation became a tool, each recorded line of dialogue a potential instrument of accountability. By evening, Marcus convened a small, trusted team. Dialogue was rapid, focused on procedure, timing, and messaging. We approach this in stages, Marcus said. Internal affairs first, followed by media statements. Each witness must be briefed on confidentiality. Every detail verified. The officer's own words are the strongest evidence. No exaggeration, no emotional outbursts. The team nodded, recognizing the weight of meticulous preparation. Marcus closed the meeting and looked out the window. City lights flickered against rain-soaked streets, mirroring the uncertainty and tension that remained. He understood that justice was not immediate, and resistance required patience as much as courage. Every measured action, every recorded dialogue, every documented observation was part of a larger strategy to confront systemic bias and hold the officer accountable. Even as fatigue set in, Marcus felt a hardened resolve. The officer's unchecked prejudice was dangerous, but exposure, strategic documentation, and unwavering adherence to the law had shifted the balance. Marcus was no longer reacting. He was orchestrating, preparing for the confrontation that would ultimately define the limits of power and the price of prejudice. The following morning, Marcus arrived at the office to find a flurry of activity. Journalists had obtained the viral footage, and news outlets were dissecting every moment of the encounter. Screens in the press room displayed stills. The officers sneer, the dismissive wave, Marcus standing composed yet clearly subjected to intimidation. The dialogue of anchors cut in sharply. The Attorney General confronted an officer in a tense exchange outside the courthouse last night. Many are questioning whether bias influenced law enforcement behavior. Marcus watched silently, noting the framing. His internal narration catalogued inaccuracies, exaggerations, and selective emphasis, knowing that perception could shape accountability. Calls came from reporters, colleagues, and federal contacts. Dialogue was deliberate, careful, and strategic. "Mr. Listen, do you feel vindicated?" one reporter asked. "This is not about vindication. It's about ensuring every citizen receives equal protection under the law." The officer's actions violated that principle. Another journalist pressed, "What legal measures are underway?" "Internal affairs has been engaged. Witnesses have been documented. All interactions have been logged. The process is underway," Marcus replied. Meanwhile, social media commentary expanded the exposure. Posts shared clips frame by frame, analyzing tone, posture, and dialogue. Supporters applauded Marcus's composure. Critics defended the officer. Public discourse amplified, and Marcus monitored it carefully, noting patterns of narrative and bias. He convened a meeting with internal affairs and legal colleagues. Dialogue was precise, each word chosen to cement accountability. "We have timestamps, transcripts, and witness statements," Marcus stated. "The officer's verbal threats are clear," a colleague replied. "Documented patterns of bias and microaggressions can support disciplinary action," Marcus added. Each element was cross-referenced against institutional procedures, ensuring the officer's defenses would be minimal. Marcus understood that exposure was not only about public perception, it was about constructing irrefutable evidence that could withstand scrutiny in multiple arenas. By midday, the officer realized the viral footage had shifted control. He was summoned for questioning, visibly tense, and trying to maintain the veneer of authority. Dialogue in the interrogation room reflected his defensiveness. "I did nothing wrong," the officer insisted. "The evidence suggests otherwise," Marcus replied calmly. "Every threat, every dismissal of authority has been documented." The officer's smirk faltered. His gestures became sharp, uneven, betraying the cracks in his confidence. Witnesses and security footage corroborated every line of dialogue, leaving him unable to assert impunity. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, repeating the viral clip and interviewing bystanders. The public perception was shifting, dialogue from commentators emphasizing systemic bias, institutional complacency, and the officer's misjudgment. Marcus reviewed each news segment, each transcript. His focus was strategic rather than emotional. He knew exposure had power only if paired with verified documentation. Every conversation, every recorded dialogue, every frame of video contributed to building a case not just against the officer, but against a system that allowed unchecked bias to thrive. Internal Affairs compiled their report, citing each threat and action, with dialogue from witnesses embedded in formal statements. Marcus ensured that legal procedures were airtight. Any attempt by the officer to distort events would fail. The evidence was comprehensive, chronological, and corroborated. By evening, Marcus stepped onto the balcony of his office, watching city lights shimmer on wet streets. Dialogue from news anchors and social media posts echoed in his mind. An attorney general publicly confronted an officer's racial bias last night. Accountability is being demanded. Despite the exposure, Marcus felt a familiar weight of tension. The officer's career and reputation now rested on fragile assumptions, yet the psychological cost to Marcus remained. Every confrontation had drained him, every microaggression lingered in memory. Still, exposure had shifted the balance. Where once the officer wielded unchecked power, now scrutiny, documentation, and public attention constrained him. Dialogue and evidence had become instruments of justice, translating personal humiliation into societal accountability. Marcus exhaled slowly. The storm of the previous night had passed, but the consequences were just beginning. Every word, Every gesture, every recorded line of dialogue now had the potential to enforce systemic checks on individual abuse. The officer's downfall was imminent, but the emotional residue of the encounter remained indelibly etched in Marcus's consciousness. The Internal Affairs office was quiet when Marcus arrived, the overhead lights casting sterile reflections on the polished floor. The officer sat across from him at a long table, shoulders rigid, hands folded, eyes flicking nervously toward the door. The veneer of authority he had carried so confidently the previous nights was faltering. "Let's begin," Marcus said, voice calm but edged with precision. "Your conduct outside the courthouse has been thoroughly documented." The officer shifted, smirk fading. I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, attempting to reclaim control. Marcus leaned forward, tapping the stack of evidence in front of him. Witness statements, timestamps, video footage, transcripts. Your own words are quoted verbatim. Every threat, every dismissal of authority, every microaggression has been logged. The officer's jaw tightened. "You're making this personal," he snapped. "It's not personal. It's accountability," Marcus corrected. "Your assumption, your bias, your refusal to respect law and office, those are the facts." Dialogue flowed like a strategic battle. Internal Affairs personnel watched, taking notes, observing tension. Every question Marcus asked highlighted contradictions in the officer's statements, the inconsistencies between his claims and documented evidence. "You claimed I was a criminal," Marcus said, voice cold. "Yet I am the Attorney General. Your assumption has no legal or factual basis. Explain how this constitutes lawful conduct." The officer stammered, attempting justification, but every word was immediately countered by documented proof. Witness dialogue from bystanders and colleagues punctuated the room, reinforcing the sequence of events. Marcus observed the slow unraveling. The officer, once confident, now squirmed under scrutiny. His gestures betrayed panic, tapping fingers, shifting weight, avoiding eye contact. Dialogue became defensive, tone sharper, volume rising, a sign of desperation rather than control. "You don't understand the pressures we face," the officer protested. "Understanding does not excuse misconduct," Marcus replied firmly. "Every action has consequences. You wielded authority without accountability. That has a cost." Internal Affairs reviewed procedural violations, ensuring the officer's formal reprimand would withstand appeals. Dialogue between staff underscored the officer's failure to follow protocol, his reliance on bias, and the absence of justifiable cause. By the end of the session, the officer was pale, muttering under his breath, a man stripped of the impunity he had once wielded. Marcus remained composed, calm, but internally aware of the emotional toll the confrontation had extracted. Dialogue with the officer had been necessary, yet draining, forcing him to maintain professionalism while exposing prejudice and asserting accountability. Outside the office, news crews had gathered, informed of internal proceedings. Dialogue among reporters and courthouse staff emphasized societal implications, systemic bias, the role of authority, and the moral weight of public office. Every recorded statement reinforced the officer's exposure. Later, Marcus convened with allies, reviewing the outcomes. Dialogue was reflective but practical. "The officer's disciplinary actions are confirmed," one colleague stated. "Yes," Marcus replied. "Suspension, internal review, mandatory training. Public accountability will follow." He paused, acknowledging the personal cost. The humiliation, the stress, the emotional labor confronting systemic injustice. It would linger. Dialogue and observation had achieved justice, but the psychological impact remained. Marcus left the Internal Affairs office, stepping into a cool evening breeze. The city lights reflected on damp streets, mirroring the balance of power shifting. The officer's downfall was no longer theoretical. It was unfolding. In private, Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. Dialogue from the day echoed internally. Every action has a consequence. Accountability is not optional. The statement was both reassurance and reminder. The fight against bias was systemic, ongoing, and required constant vigilance. Justice had been achieved, but not without cost. Emotional labor, trauma, and the weight of navigating systemic prejudice left indelible marks. Yet Marcus's resilience was intact, sharpened by experience, strategic thought, and unwavering adherence to law and principle. By nightfall, the officer's career was destabilized, his credibility in ruins, but the process of being controlled, lawful, and precise. Marcus understood the significance: power misuse to be corrected, bias exposed, and accountability enforced, but only with deliberate strategy and steadfast courage. Weeks had passed since the confrontation. The officer's suspension had been made public, accompanied by an internal review and mandatory bias training. News outlets carried follow-up stories, highlighting systemic issues and the consequences of unchecked prejudice. Marcus monitored the coverage carefully, noting how dialogue from witnesses and colleagues shaped public understanding. In his office, Marcus reviewed emails and phone messages from supporters, federal colleagues, and advocacy groups. Dialogue within these communications was measured, appreciative, and reflective. "Your composure made a difference," one message read. "The documentation was impeccable," another added. Despite the external validation, Marcus felt the weight of the ordeal. Emotional residue lingered: the humiliation, the stress, and the realization that even positions of power could not shield one from bias. Dialogue with his assistant revealed the continuing strain. "Are you okay?" Lena asked quietly. Marcus replied, "but okay doesn't capture it. Nothing erases the memory. I can only ensure accountability and move forward strategically." Outside the office, social media continued to discuss the case. Dialogue between commentators emphasized lessons about systemic bias and institutional accountability. The officer's attempt to defend his actions was scrutinized and dismantled publicly. The combination of evidence, witness statements, and Marcus's unwavering adherence to law had created a clear narrative of injustice and consequence. Marcus attended a federal oversight meeting, where dialogue centered on implementing safeguards to prevent similar incidents. Policy discussions, procedural adjustments, and training programs were highlighted. Marcus contributed calmly, citing evidence and experience, ensuring that personal ordeal translated into institutional improvement. Even in private moments, Marcus reflected on the personal cost. Emotional labor, sleepless nights, and the need for constant vigilance had exacted a toll. Dialogue with trusted colleagues acknowledged this reality. "Resistance is exhausting," one said. "Yes," Marcus replied, "but necessary. Every step matters in reshaping expectations and enforcing accountability." The officer's career trajectory had altered dramatically. Opportunities were rescinded, reputational damage was irreversible, and his authority diminished. Dialogue from supervisors and internal affairs reinforced the consequences. Authority grounded in bias is unstable and unsustainable. Marcus's own path was not untouched. The ordeal strengthened his resilience, sharpened his strategic thinking, and reinforced moral clarity. Dialogue, observation, and precise action had transformed a moment of personal attack into a broader lesson in accountability. As night fell, Marcus looked out over the city, rain-soaked streets gleaming under streetlights. He considered the lingering tension between power, bias, and accountability. Dialogue from news coverage echoed faintly in his mind. Justice enforced, but vigilance remains essential. The poetic justice was clear. The officer faced the consequences of prejudice and abuse of power, while Marcus emerged as a symbol of resilience, strategic intellect, and unwavering adherence to law and principle. Yet, the emotional imprint of the confrontation was undeniable, a reminder that systemic change comes at personal cost. Marcus exhaled slowly. The streets were calm, yet the echoes of past encounters remained. Dialogue, documentation, and deliberate action had won the immediate battle, but the vigilance required to confront bias and uphold justice was ongoing. The city continued to hum, indifferent yet witness to the unfolding narrative of accountability, resilience, and moral rectitude.